Hey, what's up? It's Kevin Rogers. Welcome to Copy Chief Radio, brought to you by copychief.com. See how that works? Let's get into it. Todd Herman, man, it's great to have you on. Thanks for being here.
Kevin Rogers, my friend, you are a champ for having me on. I appreciate it.
Dude, I'm excited about this book, obviously, like seeing it everywhere. But man, you know, in copywriting, we focus on big ideas, right?
Yeah.
And a big idea, you know this, we travel in similar circles. You're a great student of marketing, great implementer of marketing. Big idea's got to be clear, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, intellectually stimulating. It's just this title of this book has all that, the alter ego effect. How long have you been knowing the title of this book before you wrote it?
Knowing the title of the book, probably, I'd say 5 or 6 years. Yeah, because it's been a part of my training company since 2003-ish, 2004. And it was, because I used alter egos with the way that I worked with athletes. And so it was always the secret sauce. It was, like Coca-Cola has their secret recipe or KFC has their 11 herbs and spices that they keep, locked away. This particular concept was what I kept locked away inside of my training company because it was really the secret sauce of why I'm known for being like a quick hit artist with athletes, where there's a lot of strategies that you use with people to help them, master their mental game or their inner game and the emotional game of things so that they can perform at their peak levels. And a lot of the strategies are long-term in nature, like meditation is one, like undeniable, extremely powerful to align the mental, emotional, and physical self together. But it takes a while before you will have a direct result from it sometimes. And, I became a quick hit guy because I could come in and if someone's competing in the US Open, like I live here in New York City. So if someone's competing in the US Open on Saturday and they're struggling and it's a Wednesday, I could get brought in and in a few days I could shift them back around to them getting into that flow state. And the alter ego was the way that I made that happen.
Wow, it's great. You tell a story in the beginning of the book about Bo Jackson, seeing him backstage as you're about to speak at a big conference. And you mentioned that you're speaking about this alter egos and how they help elite performers, do better. And he hears your premise and he thinks for a second and he says, Bo Jackson has never played it down in football in his life.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite responses I've ever gotten back to, meeting or talking to someone about the things that I do. Yeah, we were just backstage and I had just got done telling him how he won me a lot of football games on Tecmo Bowl as a kid on Nintendo. And because if you didn't know this, he was the cheat code for that game. Basically, he was untackleable in that football video game. And when I told him about the alter ego thing, that's what his comment and reply back was. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. And he said, yeah, like I was, growing up, I had some, issues with anger. And while that can be channeled on the field, in the game of football, that could help you. For me, it kind of got me in trouble sometimes. I would maybe take some bad penalties or I wasn't all that coachable. And so one night I was watching a movie when I was young and I saw this character come on the screen that was cold, unemotional, methodical, and calculating. And I just thought to myself, wait a second, what if I took that out on the football field as with the way that I played? And it was Jason from Friday the 13th. And it's still one of my favorite alter egos that people have used to really get out of their own way and bring all of their skills to the field, because people go, what? Someone who's angry and they're going to become a serial killer? And I'm like, well, no, but that's the powerful thing about being a human being is we all get to have our own takeaways from things. And his big takeaway was the unemotional part. And he thought that if I could just, plod along with that unemotional sort of cadence, it would free all of my skills. And that's exactly what happened. So Jason lived on the field and that's where he stayed.
I love it. And, that's similar to your experience, I think, in how you discovered this. This was a survival tactic you had to figure out young in your athletic career.
Yeah. I mean, we all have a bit of an origin story for why we got into the things that we got into. And for me, anytime someone ever asked me about, but why did you get into like mental game work? I always had a very kind of surface level intellectual response where it was like, well, I was just always fascinated with the mental game and I got into it. And the real, story behind it was I couldn't tell the real story because it was just too still painful for me. And it was also very much, one of my secrets that I was locked away with around shame and guilt. And then I finally kind of came to terms with it and released all the shame and guilt. But mine came from the fact that, when I was young, I was 12, I was at a church camp and I was sexually assaulted over the course of 2 days by two men. And, I was a super happy kid. I was a farm kid growing up in Western Canada, never really had a lot of trials and tribulations yet. And that absolutely, wrecked me. And I got into latching on to any sort of mental game thing, strategy, device that could help me just cope with, the tough world that I was living with on the inside. And I never ever shared that story until even just a year and a half ago.
Wow.
First time I shared it was a year and a half ago with my wife and a good friend when I was just kind of finally reached my kind of breaking point with it. But I started to, tap into my creative imagination so that I could, live a more maybe playful life when I was playing sport, get past some of those things. And sport is great because it has a natural sort of border around it where most people understand that you get to kind of go out there and express yourself in a different way, right? Like where the rules are a little bit different than they are in kind of regular, everyday life. Art is a lot the same way. People can express themselves differently, or that's why they get attracted into the world of entertainment or music or some other form of personal expression, because it's a way for a lot of people to cope with just some of the challenges that life has thrown their way. And I found that way. I don't know if it'd be interesting if you found that with your experience, because you've coached a lot of people, mentored a lot of people. And, it's copywriting is writing. And sometimes you're writing for other people, but you get to, I love talking to copywriters too, because it's such a creative group.
Yeah.
And the way that they're able to like navigate back and forth between, one person who's got a, nutraceutical business and you're writing copy for their supplements. And then you got this person over here who's writing, now you're writing for someone who's got some sort of, information offer in the, manufacturing space or something like that. And that takes a real skill of finding, different ways of expressing yourself from a creative standpoint.
Yeah, no doubt about it. What's interesting is that I think we often have to do that. We have to come outside of ourselves. Obviously, voice is a big thing, right? Like like you said, we're often writing for someone else, and that's kind of the beauty of the gig of copywriting is if you can fall in love with your client, like the ultimate goal, in the beginning, you're just kind of taking the work you can get. Yeah. And then as you advance, it's like, no, I want to get to become this person. It's almost like method acting, know?
Yeah. Dude, you just pinged on something that I talk about that's so important in order to really unleash the power that an alter ego provides. You need to be emotionally connected to its origin story. Because when you think about life, okay, so like what stops people from taking action towards the dreams or the goals that they have? Because most people don't have an issue of building the kind of vision and dream in their head of what they want to be happening or the actions that they want to be taking, right? So that's the emotion, that's the mental side of it. But then that idea needs to walk across the bridge of our emotional self in order to get out onto the field of play of action, okay? So thought and action is how something gets manifested, but it has to get across the bridge of our emotional self. And the emotional self, like I've said this for decades now, is where resistance sits. That's where the enemy sits, I talk about in the book. And I use the enemy as a way of giving people a context of, this alter ego, which is really there to help unleash and reveal the heroic self that you already have inside. Okay. And so it just creates this great duality of like, it's a good, healthy way to think about the battle and the struggle that we all need to go through in order to realize a new self. And so the great thing about or in the struggle is that resistance, and resistance comes in many forms. It's like our personal history, the concern and worry about other people are going to think of us,
Right.
personal trauma, like in my experience, plus all the other stuff that's there, are all different strings that the force of resistance uses to stop us. But and so many people have a tough time seeing themselves be successful at something, possibly,
Right.
or graduating to a new level, because what they're doing is they have just associated themselves with a specific definition of their identity.
Right.
This is who I am, Kevin.
Right.
How do I change that? And it's like, no, you're not a tree. Human beings are not trees. We get to grow and evolve and change and shift. That's the beauty of who and what we are, or what we're made of. And so what an alter ego helps people do, and has helped people to do for millennia, is when you tap into the idea of a different identity, what you've just done is you've cut the most important part of the process, all the strings of resistance, because now you're not taking your narrative out there to get it out there. You're taking that alter ego, and it's now the bridge of emotion is no longer up, it's down, so that you can walk across it, because the resistance isn't there anymore. And so the important part of that process is, because so many people go, it's so easy to go to a superhero. Okay, my alter ego is going to be like Superman or Wonder Woman, because it's just a natural association that we all have. We think of alter egos, we think of superheroes. But I can tell you what, what the most popular category of alter egos that people have used is? Grandmothers.
Wow, no kidding.
Because when you think about what I just said before we got into kind of this part of the discussion, it's so important to emotionally connect to it. And so there's a lot of people, not everybody has like a grandmother that's, they're super close to or that they're inspired by. But if there was a category of a group of people and things, grandmothers is the most popular one. And it's because the emotional connection of the narrative is already there. The origin story is there. Like, so for me, I'm lucky. I had two grandmothers that I really connect with. And then the important part of this then is when you're stepping into that identity that you're adopting, so that you're custom building something to help you go win on that field, you never want to dishonor the memory of it. That's the importance of this. Like, I would if I am activating my grandmother, say as the example, as my alter ego to help me go and, do the hard things that I need to go do, the idea of dishonoring something that we love, we'll never do that, because just think about it, Kevin, you will do more for your children than you'll do for yourself.
Sure.
Right? That's a natural thing.
Yeah.
So for me, as a guy who's a mental game strategist, peak performance guy, all this kind of stuff, I don't want to invent things for human beings to have to struggle through. I'm looking for the natural psychological switches that are already built inside of human beings that I'm going to leverage to help you go and do the things you want to go do. And one of them is the fact that we will do more things for others than we'll do for ourselves. So in my head, I go, aha, people do that. How can I build that into my process to help people achieve things more rapidly? Well, I want to ask them the question, are you going to honor this person?
Yeah.
Or are you going to dishonor them?
The couple things about this idea of grandmothers is brilliant to me.
Yeah.
One is, I think it's a unique relationship between a child and a grandparent, because the old joke is, hey, we get to spoil them, right? It's sort of pure emotion. And the parents stuck in the middle going, oh, great, I get to be the rule maker and the logical one, right? But there's something to that, because am I right in that to, use the alter ego to its fullest, we need to sort of detach some of that criticalness, that logic, yeah? Yeah,
100%. It's the promise of my sports company. Like when I started that in 1997, was my sole focus was to help athletes get into the zone and flow state. I was I developed a natural gift to finding the zone and flow state. I actually developed the biological process for how to go do that. And an alter ego taps into our creative imagination. Truly the one superpower that human beings have is the thing that's the thing that we're gifted with. Our ability to create heavens from hell, to create story and narrative, is something that we are the only ones on this planet that can do. We're the only ones that can do that. And yet we start to move away from its power as we grow older. Right? Like we start to, and it's natural because our brains are developing. Our frontal lobe starts to take over and develop more. And that's where our reasoning, our judgment, our thinking, critical thinking skills are. What's really interesting from a scientific side of things for people to note is from the age of 0 to 7, brainwave state of a child is at theta brainwave state. Okay, so if people understand brainwave states, there's beta sits at the very top, then alpha, then theta, then delta at the very, very bottom. And delta is you reach it, when you get into like super deep sleep for a very short amount of time. And that's where like phenomenal rest and recovery happens. And theta is accessing a creative mind. And that's what you're actually hitting when you get into the zone and flow state. So what are kids doing at 0 to 7? They're playing with their minds. They're so active with creating different worlds in their heads and creative play and all that, right? And then what happens at 7? This critical thinking brain starts to develop. And then we also hear things like, oh, you need to grow up, or you need to act your age, or you also start to go, oh, I can't wait till I'm 10, or I can't wait till I'm 12, or I can't wait till I can drive. And you're always like looking forward and can't wait to get to the next milestone. And you're looking at what adults are doing. You're like, oh, I can't wait to be an adult. And you're looking at adults and you're like, oh, they're so serious. And so I should probably be more serious too. And all of these different paradigms end up pulling us away from this creative imagination that helped us to discover what we're made of. And we played with the ideas of superheroes, jumping off of the sofa as Wonder Woman or Black Panther or Superman to see how far I could jump, or, in our front driveway when we were trying to, wear the persona of our favorite sports star to see what we could do if, right? That's the answer. That's the question that we're asking ourselves. What can I do if? And I'm going to be Wayne Gretzky, or I'm going to be Michael Jordan, or I'm going to be, Ken Griffey Jr., or whatever it might be for someone. And it, for a moment, allows us to suspend the disbelief of what we think we can and cannot do. And we go, yeah, I get it. Todd's going to go to the sidelines and I'm going to be Wayne Gretzky now. and it frees us. That's what it does. It frees us from that identity that we thought might hold us back. That's so important.
Yeah. Again, that's what I love about this. As I said in the beginning, it's a big idea. I love that you were sort of sitting on this in honor of your clients, your private clients. And anybody, you search Todd. If you don't know about Todd, his resume is unbelievable. He's literally elite, defines the category of people he's worked with and coached, because you've had other amazing products and systems that have really, 90-day year and things that have really helped people. And what I love about this is that it's not just an idea. It's not just a concept to be interested in. It's something that you can, in reading the book, it's not just something to explore. It's something to practice and develop. So I want to ask a specific question. I'm thinking about, freelancers, particularly copywriters, or any really freelancer who has to go and sell themselves. That's a big challenge. When they have to get on these prospect calls and they get caught up in their head and they feel insecure and they have imposter syndrome. Is there a way to, how much can we turn this on and off in given situations?
Oh, it's unlimited, Kevin. Like it's use. That's why I say it's like, I didn't invent alter egos. Okay. I didn't invent them. Like they're a natural part of the human condition. Cicero, the great Roman philosopher and statesman, was the person who first gave voice to the alter ego when he penned a letter. And I mean, to note, Cicero is named as one of the, if not the number one, the top 2 most important and influential Roman statesmen and philosophers of all time. Okay, so extraordinarily wise person. And he penned a letter to a friend in 44 BC, and he brought up the alter ego as a trusted friend and ally. And that's really important because, Kevin, you beat the drum of this. I beat the drum of this. If there is a way to grease the slide to success, nothing, bar none, nothing beats constantly building a powerful network of friends and allies around you. Because when you are always within arm's reach of someone that can open a door for you, make an introduction, all that kind of, ping on to get some help. I mean, that's a pretty unstoppable power that you get to put into your arsenal to help you do the hard things, right? So everyone understands that, but, and this has been what I've been working on with people for such a long time, so few people think about building a trusted friend and ally between the 6 inches of their own ears to help them navigate the challenges or the natural, points where you're bumping up against your comfort zone and you need to evolve into another self in order to get into that next zone that you're trying to get to, right? And it's so natural for all of us. I mean, that's been my business for 22 years. It's built around, Todd or Todd's concepts or something like that. And I totally struggled with, trying to sell myself. But the moment I started showing up in business, my business alter ego when I first started out then was Super Richard. I went out, bought a pair of non-prescription glasses because I was so insecure about how young I looked, because I looked like I was 12 when I started out. And I went and bought a pair of non-prescription glasses. I was doing the reverse Superman. Superman put on glasses to become mild-mannered and Clark Kent so that he could be accepted by society. I put them on to be Superman, that Superman version of myself. And I didn't think that I was selling Todd anymore. I was the caretaker of Todd, and I was getting out there and that idea of a third person now freed me and unshackled me from the concerns and worries of saying good things about what I was good at. It's so funny. Like, I would say everyone that's listening to this, the most difficult content they've ever written in their lives is their about page.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like I've said this to people that are in that world and they're like, oh my God, totally. Or the resume, right? It's just because that you're a lot more than just what you're putting down, right? Like, it's that classic question of, oh, so what do you do? And you're like, oh my God, like, and I mean, we all know the 96 different formulas of answering that question in a creative way to get people to continuously respond, but it's still difficult. But when you sit down and you're activating an alter ego to write it, boy, does it ever make it easier. And on my about page, I just had a website redesign, but I had, and I wrote mine in bullet point form, and it was my, and I think I said at the very top of the page, I said, I think I said something like, welcome to my about page. And I know what you want. You want to put me into a box, and I get it. We all want to put a label on someone so we can put them neatly into our mind and say, that's what this person is about. But here's what I can tell you. I am a hell of a lot more than a few accomplishments that I've had in my professional life, just like you. So below are some highlights and some lowlights of my personal and professional life. I hope it serves you. And if there's a way that I can help, let's make it happen, kind of thing. And I had so many people reach out to me about that part. They loved that part. And then the other part on my about page that people loved was, one of my bullet points was, I am exceptionally elite at helping people navigate the mental game and develop a state of peak performance. And I never apologize for it. And I had so many people reach out, and the people who it really resonates with are actually very successful people. If there was ever someone, which never happened, but I know how a lot of people are, if there's anyone who it might be like, oh, that person's arrogant, it's people who sit in the average middle.
Yeah.
They argue for their own limitations. Right. So to your point, in your question, yeah, you can absolutely use this to help you get past those insecurities you might have about selling yourself, because you can let another persona do it for you. Now, you're not going to say this to anyone else, right? This is all stuff for you to help, again, bring that trusted friend inside of your own mind. Yeah, like I'm being unique. I'm being very unique because I'm teaching people about this, where I'm unpacking how things went in my own head, but I never get my clients to go do that. Like this is for me to do because I'm the trainer and teacher of it. But we typically never talk about our alter egos. Again, this is something that's personal for all of us. And then when you do that, it's like your secret little weapon that you're using that no one else knows about.
Yeah. And what's great is, sometimes we have video conferencing now, but a lot of times it's just on a call, audio. And Todd's the reason, if you've seen the book cover, there's a pair of glasses on the cover, is because that's not only what Todd used to kind of activate his alter ego, as he's mentioned. He talked about other people who have done it, including Dr. Martin Luther King, and those are actually King's glasses.
That's right.
On the cover. But the beauty of this is you could have something like a pair of glasses or a hat or anything that you just put on before a call like that, right? Yeah. And you become this character. But I don't want to make it sound sort of so surface. it's Kev here. And if you like this podcast, then you are going to love the Copy Chief app. Total, custom, easy to use, smooth phone app where you can listen to every podcast episode, plus get all the show notes, and dig it. You can listen right inside the app, even when your phone is in the locked position. Super cool. Plus, right there in the same app, you get access to all the great free Copy Chief content to help you write better, higher converting copy. Plus, members can access the private forum area right from the mobile app. It's available for you for free right now wherever you get your apps. Apple, Android, go get it. Download the Copy Chief app today because nobody writes alone. In the book, you go into the sort of the different cores, Todd. We don't have time to obviously go through all those, but you want to give us just give us a picture of what needs to happen for us to be able to adopt and embrace an alter ego that we can activate as needed.
Well, I mean, I appreciate the fact, because what you're trying to say is that there's so much more to the concept than just the kind of maybe surface level stuff that we might be talking about, even though we're not really talking about surface level stuff. But there is, like, I talk about the science of, what it's doing and how it's been used for a long time to really help people overcome some personal narratives or find themselves and create themselves. But yeah, in chapter 3, like anytime I'm trying to help people understand something, it's important that I try to give people context. And so I have this model that I unpack in chapter 3 that just shows that how our identities end up getting shaped and created are impacted by 4 kind of layers. Yeah. And if you think that at the very core of ourselves, it's just we're all built with pure possibility, right? Like there's this creative expression that human beings have that the creative imagination is there to help with, that can help us create what we want for ourselves. And you can think that, the pure energy of love sits there, or affection and all these great things. And then what happens is we're born, and then these layers start to get built on top of us. And we make the mistake of defining ourselves by these things that happen to us or the worlds that we're born into, and we think that that's us. And it's really not, though. Like when you truly honor how we're built, those things aren't us. That's an identity that you're associating yourself with, but you're more than that. You can shift and change. And so one of those layers that just outside the core part of ourselves, I call it our core drivers layer. And that core drivers is where we associate ourselves with things that are larger than us, right? Our family, our nation, our community, our religion, some tribe that we might be a part of, or an identifiable group that we're a part of. Could be our race as well. No one does this better at creating a narrative about who you are when you're wearing this than the military. The military, right? They're constantly hammering home the credo,
right.
What it means, the values, right? And so when you put on that clothing, you're activating these sets of values, which is really powerful. But then it also can trap people, because then you take off that uniform, and then when you get home,
right.
you haven't shifted your identity to being a powerful person that shows up for your family. And I've done this. I've worked with Navy SEALs, Green Berets, all sorts of people in the military to help them craft another identity that helps serve them in another field of play or role in life. So core drivers, then outside of that is our belief layer, and that's the attitudes that we have about ourselves, the story that we tell about who we are, the things that have happened to us, and those could be positive or negative. Then another layer outside of that is what I call the layer of action. And at that layer is where our behaviors are, the competencies that we've built up over time, the knowledge that we have, and those things can both be positive and negative. This is where people end up, this is where imposter syndrome can sit out there, where we doubt our skills, or we say things like, well, it was right place, right time. We dismiss away our successes.
Right.
Because of, again, just luck or whatever the case is. And then the final layer is really like the layer of context, which is like the field of play itself. That's where the people, the places, the things are that might affect the way that we show up. It's like, Kevin thinks he's a great comic when he's talking at his local or when you're doing it at the local comedy club. But the moment I put you on a stage, with Burr or,
right.
Something like that. All of a
Right,
sudden
right.
you lose your confidence.
At a festival or something, right? I'm like,
Yeah. And that's what people do, right? It's like, oh, I'm a great player when I'm in my home ice, but when I'm on when I'm playing an away game, it's like, no, nothing's changed.
Mm-hmm.
The rules are still the same. The ice is still the same. You're the one that's creating that rule and narrative. Anyway, the point of me sharing that inside the book is to give people an understanding of like, this is actually how we shape our identity. And there's so many people that have reached out and been like, that model alone has helped me figure out so much about how I've held myself back and where I have some of these strings of resistance that have sort of maybe held me back. So it's a great way to give people a tool.
Yeah.
But then what we can also use with it is that's how we can actually custom build a powerful identity to help us go win in a specific field of play of our life and a role that we play.
Yeah. I hope I'm not sharing out of school. But
no,
I'd like to tell the story of a big favor you did for me. Speaking of comedy, so a couple of years ago, I was challenged by a friend to come back into stand-up after 12 years away and open for him at a theater in front of 2,000 people. And then I decided to do this and got excited. And then I, of course, announced it to the world on Facebook. Hey, join me on this journey, right? And then I wake up and go, wait a minute. I could go out there and suck, right? And so I said, I gotta talk. This is another thing I appreciate about you, Todd, because to me, this is when somebody's really got the goods, is if you instinctively think of the one and only person you feel like could just help you get through this, right? And you were the one and only person who came to mind, and you very generously got on the phone with me. And you said, so what's going on? And I told you what I was up against, and you said, okay, so what's the problem? What do you do? And I said, well, I guess I'm scared that I won't, it's going to take a lot of work. I've got to go do all these sets in a local club and get ready for this big show. And that's going to take a lot of time from my family. And I'm worried about the balance of, all these things, family, work, the comedy. And you go, okay, what else? and I said, well, I guess also that I'm afraid I could go up there and suck. And that would be super embarrassing. I get people flying in, friends and colleagues I never expected. Now they're flying in for the show. There's no way to hide if I bomb. And you said to me two things that I've never forgotten, and it had immediate shift and completely eliminated my fear of this gig. You said, number one, balance is for average people, which is not what I expected to hear you say. Yeah. And you said, we all know there are times we have to go deep into something and prepare the people around us and then just go. And you said, number two is, if you were to go up there and not get laughs, you said that doesn't matter, because what you're doing is not about that show. It's about you braving the challenge and going to do it. You said, so it's not really what happens that night. It's what happens the next day. And if you were to go up there and bomb, the next day you'd pick up your iPhone and you look into it and you'd say, well, that didn't go as planned, so here's what we're going to do. And I hope I'm portraying accurately the advice you gave me. And the reason I want to share this with everybody is sort of one, to thank you publicly, and two, to remind people. I think it was a powerful lesson in that, man, we got to try, and no one thing can take us down if we have momentum and we're always out there going for it.
Well, and so I remember it when we were chatting, because there is no field of entertainment I'm more passionate about than comedy. Not that I'm a practitioner of it, but I think it is the most challenging of all of the different entertainment arts, because you're going up there and you've got an audience that's expecting you to make them laugh, right? Like singers don't have that, and actors don't have that. It's very, very different. But so, happy to help someone who's a comic and going to go spread laughter. The one thing around the balance, and I've said this consistently for a very long time, and we talked about this, is how can we also include your family in it? Because it's so valuable for your children to see, like, everyone's so caught up and worried that they're over, they're working too much around their kids. And of course you want to be giving your children time, but you can also be including them in the process, because then they learn the value of what it takes to do, challenging things. And that you have to make sacrifices, and the sacrifice in its root form means to give up something of a lower value for something of a higher value, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a trade that's happening there. And so, by bringing your kids and your family together and say, hey, this is really important to me. I really could use your support, and it's going to mean that I'm going to have to leave home at 8:00 at night most nights to go and practice my set and all that. So you're not going to see me around, but this is why we're doing it, and this is why I'm doing it. And that's so important to include them in the process. And then on the side of things of you showing up and so what if you bomb?
Mm-hmm.
The great value in life is always found in the suffering. Strength is forged in the fires of suffering. It's so important that people understand that. Strength is forged in the fires of suffering. And most people avoid the suffering because they don't see themselves or their current identity as being able to withstand the suffering. And that's the power of an alter ego. An alter ego is something that you build to help out and take on the suffering for you. Even though it's actually you, of course, going out and doing it, that one little bit of suspension of disbelief can help someone finally take the action and make the call or reach out to someone. That's, Beyonce used Sasha Fierce as a way for her to get past that sort of internal struggle that she had, where she was trying to reconcile the fact that she comes from a church-going, gospel-singing family. Right. And now she's standing on stage singing provocative lyrics and dancing provocative moves. Right? So she created another identity to help her go and do that. And Kevin, this actually comes down to proper psychological thought. So the field of psychology for the longest time felt that the single self, or someone who had a single self or single identity, was someone who had the best mental health. Okay, you had one identity that you classified yourself with. Now, my experience as a practitioner working with athletes and other entertainers and public figures and leaders and entrepreneurs, that was not my experience. People lived in context. They were magnifying parts of themselves to help them succeed in different areas. That creates multiple, they live in context and they have multiple selves. You have one body, but you're saying, no, this is I'm bringing Super Richard here, and I'm bringing Mr. Rogers, which is who I identify with when I go home as a dad. He's my inspiration as Mr. Rogers. And, that's me activating my gentle self. All day long, I'm flexing the muscle, Kevin, of being a challenger personality with people so that I can help coach them or advise them and come up with trainings to help get people over the finishing line. But if I brought the challenger personality home to my kids, that's not what they want. They don't need that. They want fun. They want fun, playful dad. Right. And so Mr. Rogers is my inspiration, because that's my way of being able to create a great partition and me being very intentional about what I want to bring to my kids. Okay. And so what Beyonce did there was she created that great context. And now so I said before, they always thought that a single identity was the most powerful way to live life. And now they've completely flipped. In the last decade, probably the fastest growing field of psychology study is the field of multiple self theory, which is, and it's not theory anymore, it's people who live in context in life and see themselves as having multiple selves. They've got a role here as mom or dad, and they got another role as husband or wife, and they got another role as entrepreneur, and then maybe even inside the role of, because you're like this, you've got the role inside your business as a leader of the business, right? But you also have the role sometimes you got to step into where you're the guy who does copywriting, so that's another role that you're doing, and then you got role of salesperson. And so for me, even each one of those, I've got a different way that I activate a different self to go and do that job, and it's fun, it's more playful, and it helps you navigate that resistance that might be there. It's so healthy to do that, though. So healthy.
Yeah. Amazing. Todd, man, I know you've been on a daunting sort of PR tour for this book because you believe in it so much. You said something great to me before we got on, which is you're so passionate. Don't write a book if you don't want it in every house in the world. I love that, man. I can feel your passion behind this. It's in every word inside the covers. I highly recommend this is what I do when I start an audiobook. I knew I'd love hearing you read because I knew I'd feel your passion, and that's very present in the audiobook. And then when something's good to me, I know in the first chapter, I go and I order the hardcover as well. So I've been ingesting you both ways. And man, it's great stuff. And I think, again, like I said earlier, it's not just, this is not data you're going to ingest and then move on. This is something that I think is going to stir something inside of you that you realize was always there. You may have been using, and now you've sort of got the playbook on how to really use it in a powerful way.
Yeah, I'm happy you said that because, like I say, I didn't invent the alter ego. I codified the process to use it in a powerful way with great intention that is extremely healthy for people. But for me, I call it the great remembering. If nothing else, the most common response I get back from people, which is now into the thousands, is, I feel like I've been using this before. And my response still is always the same. I know you have, because it's a part of being a human being. We all have done this. Some people have forgotten about it. And my responsibility with this concept is to shepherd it forward more and get people to remember that it's there, and it's a powerful way to navigate life and get yourself out there to do the things that you dream about more. And one of my favorite things about the book too is the fact that I left it all in the book. There's so many people who kind of try to give me some advice around, make sure that you mention your workshops and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And I never felt good about any books that I read that way. And so I wanted to put every single bullet point process that there is to untap this thing. And if someone ever decides that they want to buy a multimedia program with it, that's just their preferential choice, not because they need to. Yeah. So everything's in there for people. And yeah, like I said to you before, go buy the book, because you're going to have to at some point in time, because I'm not done until everyone owns it.
That's right. Might as well get it over with and you'll be glad you did it sooner than later.
100%.
Go to Alter Ego Effect, EFFECT.com, or just search Google Alter Ego Effect, Todd Herman. Brother, and man, thanks for doing this. It was great, as I knew it would be, and I can't wait till we do it again.
Love the support, man. Appreciate you, buddy.
Copy Chief Radio. Copy Chief Radio.